hello, hi, hola, handling greeting. Let's look at software. Today, FlowScape 1.1, available at itch.io from Pixel Forest, a developer of one person. We can make landscapes, we can make castles and bridges and rocks and scatterable items and general trees and shrubs and animals, bugs. These are all things that we can lay down. They're predetermined. You can paint them on just like you see here in the picture. We're going to go driving through and do this ourselves. What you cannot do is create your own geometry. So you'll be given the ground geometry. You can make a couple of special tweaks, and you can create things like this through camera settings and render views like a game and the screenshot of a game. You're pretty much making a wallpaper for yourself, and you can download this. It's $10, and I don't often get things for money, but this one was worth it. The single developer did a really good job. It's very meditative, very Zen garden-like. You just paint things on like you see here in the picture. I'm recording the audio after a flop, unfortunately, where my audio didn't record, so I'm trying to remember all the things I said. I downloaded this about 8 days ago, and I've really enjoyed it every day that's possible. I haven't played with it every single day. What this does not do is record camera motions. It does not record animations. It does not import. It does not export. It is at, here we go, for Windows, Linux, and Mac, it is at version 1.1. Very important to know that 1.1 is out about a month now. I'm talking to you from late February. This came out mid-January 2019. I will skip over into the folder that I unzipped after downloading the FlowScape software. Here it is now with different screenshots. This is also the repository where your pictures are saved. Some people have requested that they get to choose a different directory that's not available yet. So this little image here with the tree and the island, this is what you double-click to get things started. So, double-click away. It is a Unity software. You can get this little dialogue and choose which key bindings you like and choose your screen resolution. I'm using graphics quality of high, and my new screen capture software is recording at 15 frames a second. I did that on purpose to keep file sizes a little bit low. Windowed with this game just means that you can have it with the minimize, restore, and exit buttons up there. There's my Steam. It never likes connecting anymore. But I have found, here's the start screen, I've found that the Alt-Tab switch running programs lets me dip out of FlowScape 1.1 effortlessly, so I've never started it in windowed mode. Here it is, the beginning. Every time the beginning, and it comes with music, and it gives you a random seed right here for populating the terrain. There are a select number of terrains that you can modify in a minimal sense, and after it's done populating, it opens up all the menus. Now this one right here, I like to click on the headphones, and then this sub-menu opens up. It's full of the keyboard noises and whatever sound effects, music effects. So this, on the far right, is the main menu. It's a bunch of icons. When you select one, a sub-menu appears to its left. You may have seen that tooltip show up just a moment ago. That tooltip with version 1.1 is still a little bit unpredictable. These different sound effects I've never messed with. It looks like a babbling brook here, a quiet still water sound effect here, some woods above it, and that all comes out of the headphones thing. You need to click it on and click it off. Here is a dialogue for animals. There we go, a dialogue for animals. I had to click twice to get it to show up, and now the bird apparently is a transform tool. So there's the screen tip for the object next to the bird. Okay, these little details for $10 are easy for me to overlook, or look past, I suppose. So welcome to FlowScape. Would you like to do one of three things? That comes up every time you start the game. Trying a new seed means a brand new terrain that's cut off like a jello square from the rest of the world here. But it's so much fun. And this is the growth that the seed, I'll clear out the plants, but this is the growth that it randomly decided, and we can keep choosing random growth. We have only a select few islands and landscape pieces to choose from. Down here is the, it looks like the exact volcano that we are chosen. What I would like to see is a border around the current selection, or some sort of indicator, a yellow triangle or a red border or something, a blue outline, whatever it takes, so that at this point in time it's not so hard to understand that these two things are the same. But as we get farther along, it does become difficult. What you can change about the terrain, if not the actual shape of the terrain, is the texture of the terrain. Here we have two grounds to choose from. Ground 1 and Ground 2, and it's up to your sense of aesthetics how they mix together. Now, when returning to Ground 1 from Ground 2, I can no longer remember what I chose, because there's no selector object telling me which it were. How Ground 1 and Ground 2 combine is here in mask, and so you choose whichever one's best for you. It doesn't require a very complicated mask. The tiling, if you're not used to 3D, then this might be a little weird for you, but the pictures of the texture are applied like tiles, like bathroom or kitchen tiles. So how large or small are those kitchen tiles? And every time there's a new tile, the image of the texture repeats. This makes water come and go. Maybe we'd like no water at all. This, of the two water icons on the left, allows this sort of cross-section water standing in the air. When you select this other water icon, it does not put in clouds. Those are reflections of clouds on the extended water surface that goes to the horizon. So I don't get a big kick out of that for the time being, but it's something that you can choose. Now here we go, back into the textures. Riverbed allows brand new textures for whatever's underwater. Here's height. It's the height of the land, not the height of the water. So higher land means less water. Lower land, more water. Okay, you can have your own global warming party right there. And the tiling and this brightness, pardon me, goes directly to the riverbed texture. It's interesting that brightness will affect whatever tab you're under. Here we're under Ground 1, here we're under Ground 2, and it affects the brightness of those tabs. Now we go back to Ground 1 and affect the tiling. It affects the tiling for all of them. Ground 2, the tiling for all of them. Riverbed, the tiling for all of them. Okay, so unlike brightness, tiling is sort of universal. And the mask is unaffected by tiling. All of the textures pass through the mask. This is a lot of detail for, something that may not be the most exciting part of this application. Size is brand new as of version 1.1, and it allows you to really mess up the scale. So this right here, small, is the default size. With the earlier version that came out January 15th, 2019. If you make it grow, you are advised by me to change the tiling of your textures. Here's something that I hope changes. Every time you want to see a menu, you got to click on. Every time you stop seeing the menu, you get to click off. So under the question mark, we learn how to navigate. Drag the mouse to look around like this. Drag the mouse to look around like this. Drag the right mouse button is like moving your head on your neck. Dragging that middle mouse button is sort of like skateboarding left and right and up and down. You can also use those ASWD keys that a lot of video games let you use for walking forward, back, left, and right. And then Q and E help you grow tall and shrink. Kind of a Alice in Wonderland combo. I'm not used to moving around. So you're going to see me get real clumsy. And I don't have a joystick, but a joystick is one of the options with FlowScape 1.1 for moving around. Now, let's get building, shall we? It's easy to choose something. Here we've chosen a tree, and I just click and drag, and holy cow, those trees are so much bigger than the environment. I can use one of these sliders at the top and change different aspects of how the terrain is painted, depending on what object I'm using and stuff like that. They come and go. This is version 1.1, and here they're aligned to the world. I can back up and see that they are straight up and down instead of shooting out sideways, and I can just sweep my left click and drag across this terrain, and it feels amazing. It's really powerful. Just the sense of sprouting trees lets you, it feels like the finger of creation upon a landscape. And I just drill down, and you get this real tight, heavy population of trees growing all right there. So there are different trees to choose from, and the settings that we did above tend to be persistent. Look, my tooltips are really well behaved. Here, the flow of the brush is already pretty high. Is it heavy flow, light flow? Let me spend a moment here trying to figure out how to look down at the landscape and make a little space for myself. This is the default flow. Clicking and dragging with those trees that are fifth down on the submenu, and now here's the heavy flow. A heavy flow day for Mother Nature and her trees. I didn't say that. And lighter than standard flow. Right there, you can see all these trees really populate that island, and voila, now the recent rains have flooded the trees which appear in the riverbed. Sometimes I'm allowed to paint in that riverbed, sometimes I'm not. This time I was allowed, and the button to control some of that is actually up on that top toolbar, but at the time of recording I did not experiment with it. But I'm telling you now after the fact. So when choosing the eraser, the mouse wheel scrolling up and down changes the size of the eraser just like it changes the size of the paintbrush. But that eraser it just does not discriminate. It will just zap everything into non-existence except the landscape. If you wanted to shrink something or be a little more subtle, you would choose the transform tool, left-click the object that you want, and you can shift left-click to include more objects that you want. But here I only did one object at a time. These objects here, the tree, the shrubs, all the way down through these scatterable objects, have you noticed a pattern? They move from general to specific. So I'm still painting generally trees, large objects that can be seen from far away. Now I paint smaller objects that you'd have to get closer to. And before you can paint anything, you do have to select one from the submenu. There is no default selection that allows you to begin painting immediately. Here they're very small. We can move in, and I want you to notice this. Unlike the trees, these are aligned to the landscape. Here's the button to control that. This will allow you to align objects to the terrain, or landscape I've been saying, or the world. And the little image shows you which way you're toggled, if it's world or terrain. I kind of like that it's all pictures because that gets out of having to create translations for the software. But then again, sometimes it's a bit vague, and that can get just, I don't know, it can get like impolite, I suppose. Like, it would be nice to see a couple of words here and there. I'm growing some things underwater, and then what we're going to do is we're going to backspace with the backspace button, which is like Control Z. I do it once, twice. I've lost count because I am recording the audio after the fact. What happened was 4 times. I've gotten as many as 7 times, and this is the only time I've ever counted 4, so I'm a little confused. I think we should expect 5. That's what I think. Expect 5 undos in the history, and I don't remember if there's a way to change the number of undos. I don't think there is. So here I am floundering once again with how to control the camera. I get a little closer because these details of daffodils or jonquils really make things nice. And here we have some, what is that stuff called? It looks like elderberry or whatever, and then some red flowers. Who knows? Wherever the developer lives, they selected an amazing cross-section of wildlife. I was worried that this would feel too much like I was always in the same mountain view all the time, because the vegetation is always the same. I'm still enjoying it. I've had this 8 days. I've used it probably 20 times, okay? And I've really tried to drill down and analyze how I feel and how it behaves, and I've made it wonky. I've made it slip up and make mistakes and crash and become unstable, and then I just restart the program. It's not a big deal. 1.1 in FlowScape does not allow you. Here I'm populating fish down in the ground, or down in the water, and I'm putting some butterflies, but now I'm talking to you after the fact. You can watch me work while I tell you. FlowScape 1.1 has a known bug where it will not save some of your textures for the landscape. There, that was a bad idea. Some foxes aligned to the terrain. Very interesting, because they don't seem to do much. They're just like lazy coyotes or something. So here, the alignment has reset itself. I have to click again to make these deer align to the world instead of the terrain. And then here's a big thing. I can splash the sky. I don't know which sky I'm on right now because it doesn't tell me, but I can select a new sky and it affects the lighting that hits the animals, the trees, and the environments and shrubs. It's pretty cool. I was going to finish up by saying that because this makes mistakes and it's a known issue that it doesn't save textures, I use this specifically as a one-shot. I might leave it on for 3 hours in the background, but I don't ever try to save it. Maybe on the next version, if we do another video of this, I'll investigate how good the saving is. But I just hate to fall in love with something and then lose it. That for me would just be rotten. Here's the camera setting. It allows you to do the sun, the moon, and that's the visibility of the sun disk, that first check mark. And here's a rotational direction, and then a height direction, or height control, and the intensity of the sun you get to control. Also its temperature. Is it volcano red, or is it alien planet, very little atmosphere, cool blue? Now, because there's no set to default, I have to guess where it came from. I would really like it if there was a restore defaults button here. And the sun shafts, of course, are like God rays, the second coming there up in the sky, but we'll let physics take care of dropping the Messiah down to the ground. Camera field of view is very handy. Maybe you have a hunter's scope and you want to get zoomed in, and you know that somewhere around, there he is, somewhere around there is the barbecue you've been hoping for, or perhaps it's a security camera you bought online. It's real cheap, and hardly anything is visible because its field of view is too wide. Well, there's the default. Now there's the exposure. The white balance is very useful, sort of a cyan to a green shift, leaving out red, which I guess is just the way to go. Saturation, of course, how rich are the colors that you want visible? I'm going to select new and start all over. And this, there you see physics dropping things. This is the second of 3 scenes for this walkthrough, just so you know now that there's another one coming. This is a lovely little island, and so I decide to stay here. One of the options on that initial dialogue when you begin a new scene, and of course, I turn down the music because I want to talk to you. Some of the music is good, and you can walk through different tracks. I'll show you that in a moment with the keyboard command. There's its log that it has dropped in the water. That happens here sometimes, where I work. And moving this camera, I still, even after, almost 24 times using this program, I still struggle to move myself left and right. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the style of vegetation. What are they called? Different ecospheres or microclimates, like the equatorial rainforest versus the Arctic pine forest. It doesn't matter. Everything gets along with everything. You can just go ahead and plant whatever the hell you want to plant. So I see some lush tropicals and a fern, and then maybe like some cold weather daffodils or something. But let's take a look at the camera, because this is one of its most powerful features. FlowScape 1.1 lets you go through all of these things on the right hand side. In the middle of that, we're sort of getting down into the nitty gritty, and then at the bottom, like the extreme details. So we're moving general to specific. Here's the general, like the sun is a very important general concept. The sky rotation doesn't move with the sun. So think about lining up the direction of the sun with the cloud. Oh, here's another thing. The sun disk, when it's low and it's behind something, yes, it will cast shadows and it looks magnificent, but the sun is like, it's a ferocious hydrogen bomb. It just is so hard to hide the disk of that sun from the view of the camera, even when it's behind any part of the tree smaller than its massive trunk. The sun shafts will be interrupted by the birds. You'll see how powerful that is, and the intensity of the sun. Now that ambient light, if you don't use 3D software, it's how much light is bouncing back in the shadows around the entire scene. Maybe it comes from the other pieces of landscape or the sky or whatever. That's ambient light. Sky brightness is limited to the sky. Now the exposure does it all, because we're beginning to make things more specific. And the bloom looks like it does it all, but it only exaggerates and places an in-film fog around the bright areas. This was really smartly laid out from general to specific. And I create kind of a pastel, dreamy vista here. But I'm really pleased with the toys of generating an image. You don't just generate a landscape. You continue and you do all of this. It's happening as fast as you see it. And if you use 3D software and you wait ages for things to render, like the brightness and all that good stuff, and the shadows and the ambient features, it's just amazing how fast it goes. This bottom left button lets you take a picture, and you may remember that the pictures it takes, the screenshots it takes, are stored in the folder that has the application during installation. When you unzipped FlowScape, it created a folder, and that's exactly where these go. People want that to change. It may change soon. That's why I keep saying FlowScape 1.1. This is an unofficial look at the software. I probably should have started out saying that. Sorry, taking a drink of coffee there. This is one of the things that is really magnificent, is you can just press that space bar, hide the user interface, wrangle that camera, whatever field of view, whatever bloom settings, light settings, sky settings, sun direction. Do it the way you like it. Set it up. Think about your rule of thirds. Put something right in the center. Do whatever you want. Take a few pictures. Press the space bar. Make the user interface come and go the way you want. And you've basically got, if you have like a nice big HD TV in your living room or wherever your soirees are held, you've got a really beautiful background that people might think you made completely in 3D. And it's astonishing how peaceful this is, like a Zen rock garden. These buttons down on the bottom, these sliders, they start out pretty high, and we got to talk about aperture if you don't know about photography. A lower aperture means a lower depth of field, a more shallow depth of field. So I think, in my 2 cents, the developer should change the word aperture to DOF. Just like camera FOV is an acronym, I think aperture there should be DOF. So a high depth of field means everything is sharp. A low depth of field means if it is not the focal distance, then it falls quickly out of focus. I found that the autofocus, if it's checked in that little radio button, it's very center weighted. If we look down, I can't do it now, but if we look down, the autofocus would pick up on the water and the rocks. Now the center is basically that tree that's out to the distance, so its autofocus was generously out that far. That's a nice setting. Boom. This is called like kill your darlings. Whatever you make, be prepared to just knock it out. Take a couple pictures. It is a vacation. You ever gone on one of those vacations where it's like it's a bus tour? It's a bus tour and you don't really get to spend the night or 3 nights and visit the hostel and drink at all the pubs and, meet the locals and volunteer on the farms or whatever you do when you go on vacation. I don't volunteer on farms, but I'd be willing to. Think of it like the bus tour. You are in and out in no time flat. Here are some of the settings. There's the next track I told you about. It's a button push, and that's the, what is that? The period. We'll get you to the next track. You might be into that. I'm not, because every time I do this, I try to talk. Slow motion is good. I'll show you that at the end of the video. You can save a camera if you find a good postcard shot and then walk your camera around and then press page down and restore that camera view. Flow 1.1 sometimes saves the camera, save camera position when you save your file. And it's a bug that I don't want to encounter. And then I've been using the home button up there and choosing new to create a new scene or a new random everything. But you could just press the letter P on the keyboard. And also, here we go. Okay, just right to it. All right, boom. I have selected scatterable objects in the second submenu of buildings, and now they're hovering over where my mouse hovers over the terrain, and I'm using my scroll wheel to go through, I don't even know, 20, 15 or 20, it looks like almost 24 objects. This medieval stuff is awesome for you game types. So here we're going to put a watchtower in. I'm just going to move after left-clicking to commit, and I'm going to put another object in the terrain. These are huge things, right? For such like small terrains, like they really were, whatever, 30 by 30, the terrain size defaults. I find a little rake shed, and now I have to click out to stop my tool from getting hyper. But I put those two things there, and game map makers, I think you really need to see this. You click map from that home button, and you get this potential orthographic view, which lets you look down at everything. And it's just, you could put in lots of buildings and paths and let things be randomized. And here we're going to pretend it's sort of like a petting zoo farm, and I'm just going to spray some, I'm spraying deer. That's what some deer spray there. I'm putting some butterflies and now some magic mushrooms, because here in our game garden, of course, I can't see the mushrooms because they're one of those super fine details, and you've got to be really up close to see details. I get so excited about planting mushrooms that I forget about the general to specific advice that I've been giving you. I forget to take that advice myself, and isn't that the way life goes? So here I try to make the mushrooms as large as possible because it is for deer and dragonflies and birds and smurfs. There are some mushrooms growing on top of rocks, and that's interesting. I go into rocks here. These rocks, and I'm just going to get a teeny little paintbrush size and spray them across the bottom of the screen here. Look, there's more. They grow on top of themselves. Those rocks are so large that they stay where they are put. Now, when I select hex, smaller rocks, by the way, are sprinkled with physics. They are dropped to the ground. This hex thing is totally customizable, and it's up to you. And when I change the camera, you'll see that it sticks around in sort of a weird, awkward way. But you could use grid, you could use hex, and perhaps you know that your Smurf deer garden is, one size or another size, and each hex is 6 feet, or 3 feet, or 2 feet, or whatever it is. I just think that that's so smart. I've come out of orthographic view, and the hex is still floating up in the air, which is not a big help. If it could drop down to the ground, like one of the textures, that would be super cool. Or create perhaps like the sun rays shooting out of the ground along the lines of the hex. That would be super cool, so that there was no doubt about where that hex was. If you decide to change the size of the landscape, then you have forgotten about moving general to specific. The first thing you should do is establish the scale of your landscape. Don't generate all of your environment and then rescale the land, okay? That was an example that I give you right there because the objects do not scale with it. Now I'm going to spend some time just trying to find a beautiful shot so that we can further explore some of the camera settings, change the tiling, the size a little bit. I can lower and raise the ground. Hey, bunny. But the vegetation doesn't keep up. So in some ways it's silly, in other ways it's whatever. It's fine. Here are those rocks. They fall right to the ground. They grow from the ground. I should say it that way. You could scatter twigs, branches, trunks of trees, and rocks of various color and size and shape, and they fall to the ground to achieve kind of a naturalistic look. That is such a strong detail that I would advise you to park your camera and just do it up front in the foreground of your scene. Now, those deer, they're not bad, but my, they're big. So that rake shed makes this deer kind of big. So I'm going to shrink him down. And now he's too small because all the flowers look big, and it's just, oops, well, there's a big plant. I don't know what default was. I can't change it to default. Now he's high, but the reason this is a quiet land is because there's a giant deer, making sure that everyone is safe here in the pasture. Yep, he agrees. He was nodding. That bunny couldn't be safer. This looks cool. I mean, this is as unrealistic as this particular session was. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And the end result is it's fantastic, it's imaginative, it's colorful and bright, and I can just keep changing things. And that's exactly what I think I'm going to do. So this is one of our first looks. I chose FlowScape 1.1 on purpose. I think it is an outrageously good time. Here's the slow button as I use the camera controls. I back out. I want to thank you for your comments and likes, and feel free to subscribe. I hadn't made videos for a while, but this was a really, really worthy video to come back and begin recording again. And as always, click around, see what else is on the channel. We'll do more software. FlowScape 1.1, the unofficial walkthrough. Thanks so much for watching.